restricted or stopped trying to import petrol because they cannot get forex at the official rates, and it will substantially affect or weaken their business positions if they had to access the parallel market. Now, when the product does get in through the NNPC, at the depots they're retailing for between 230 and 215 a litre. Now we must remember that the government regulated price band is between 169 to 175 naira. Now the depot association is saying if we're buying this petrol at 230 to 250 naira a litre, it is not feasible, it is not possible for us to sell at the government price of 169 to 175. So what you then find is some stations, even within the Lagos metropolis, are selling for 250. Now, even the NNPC has started to complain that the burden of continuing to import petrol is getting out of hand. It's becoming too heavy for it. And in the midst of all of this, the refineries are still not working. Now, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources was quoted as saying the Port Harcourt refinery will come on stream at the end of January. That's in 2 weeks. We're not holding our breath out for that because I don't understand what that means. And it's not the first time they'll tell us something will be ready by a particular date, and that date will roll on and pass and nothing happens. Now we have modular refineries. Is there an arrangement to supply them with crude so that they can refine for local consumption? Then the big elephant in the room that everyone is trying very hard to avoid. The fuel subsidy has to go. We don't need to wait till June. In 2012, the previous administration then in office, that's President Johnson's regime, had proposed the removal of the subsidy, fuel subsidy. Individuals associated with this administration were vehemently against it. And if we had started to phase out the fuel subsidy in 2012, I am pretty certain, in fact, I'm confident that in 2023, we will not be discussing the fuel subsidy. Now, why does the fuel subsidy have to go? It is hampering our chances, it's restricting Nigeria from growing properly. It's also contributing to the running rate of inflation. Now, should the subsidy go in one fell swoop? No, it should be phased. But we should have a definite timeline. So you have milestones. We'll take off 20% now, for example. We'll take off another 20. So we'll do it. We could do it in installments of 20. 5 installments spread over, say, 12, 15 months, and we're done.
Will regular Nigerian citizens like you and I and a few others out there be willing to pay more, and can they pay more?
Regular Nigerians will pay more provided that. So for the regular Nigerian wants ease of life. So if he knows I can pull into a station, pay 300 now, and I'm out within seconds or within a minute or two, he will pay. Because guess what? The black market fuel sellers is not foreigners patronizing them, it's still Nigerians. There are businesses that need to run irrespective of the price of petrol. So you have your hairdressers, you have your barbers, you have your business centers, you have all these small scale businesses that need power, and unfortunately power is another problem. So we have two twin problems. Then in fact our problems are more than two. We have a number of problems that need to be addressed vigorously in the short term, and power and petrol are two of them. If we can sort out this fuel conundrum, because guess what? For as long as we continue to remain this artificially induced price, we're not just subsidizing Nigeria, we're subsidizing our neighbors, because you cannot be surrounded by nations where the least price is closer to 450, and then you say you're doing 169. You do not need anyone to tell you that some unscrupulous marketers will smuggle your product gotten at 148
Mm.
and take it across the border, even if they get it at 230, when they get across the border, they can easily sell it for 500, 600. Remember the viral video of a customs officer that was showing Nigerians how they move products from Nigeria to a neighboring country. So these are the things we need to tackle. And unfortunately, the government isn't being completely honest. They should address this matter once and for all. We're heading into an election. We're 5 weeks away from a major election. And Nigerians continue to suffer pains getting petrol. And I'm wondering how the ruling party honestly believes with this quagmire that they're doing their candidate any favors.
All right, let's move on to business day. The Nigerian Economic Summit Group has projected the unemployment rate to rise to 37% in 2023. And this means that this projected unemployment rate is about 4% points higher than the National Bureau of Statistics data, which puts it at 33% from 2020. Bugbemi?
To be honest, I'm actually surprised that the projection isn't a lot higher, because it's not like things have been improving in recent times. If we look at what the major drivers of the inflation are, there's food inflation, largely caused by the flooding, which happened for most of last year, or for a good part of last year, which has affected agriculture. And resultants means that a lot of people are out of work, one. A lot of production has stopped, a lot of farming has stopped, because obviously the land isn't available. Then there's also insecurity, which has been with us for a while, and which, well, should I say, has been escalating, because it hasn't abated in recent times. So both of those issues have really impacted on the employment situation. And then that also means that a lot of rural-urban migration is occurring. So you have a lot of people leaving the rural areas because there are no opportunities or reduced opportunities, and coming to the urban areas, notably Lagos, because Lagos tends to absorb a lot of people. And then they come to Lagos and there's really no work. So you have a lot of people who are not working, and or those who are working and are not fully engaged. Now, so my question now is, what I wonder is, this will not improve as things have gone on so far. And when you now add, of course, the problems and challenges that we have with fuel scarcity, which also means, because as there's fuel scarcity, or as there's an unsure price of petrol, businesses will have to moderate their operations based on that. Not even just petrol, even with diesel, because there's no subsidy on diesel. And based on all the global occurrences which has affected the price of diesel, that means that the price has consistently increased, which means, and largely we know that people augment electricity power with diesel supply. So a lot of companies also are having to restructure their operations based on that. What that also means is that potentially there may be job losses, because if companies reduce operations, there'll be fewer people who are available to work. So obviously my question now is, so what's the government's plan to be able to address all of these issues, to be able to support this? I know that when this administration came on, they had also spoken about job creation, but I don't think that the impacts of the jobs that have been created, if any have been so significant. So going back to the unemployment rate, I don't see it reducing. I see it actually escalating beyond the projected 37%.
We've got a message here. This one is from Cisco Delgado. He says, our problems are infinite, but the fact is, once the power problem is sorted out, every other problem would naturally take shape. Victor says, if the subsidy is removed, won't the Nigerian factor in Mormon and oil marketers allow these businessmen exploit Nigerians by selling petrol at the prices they so wish? There should be strict compliance to price moderation in sale of petrol, as we see in the telecom sector done by NCC. Chika says, fuel scarcity is biting harder day after day. And okay, I'll have to come back to this message. Let's move on to the next headline, and this one is coming from This Day. Federal government says 120 billion naira spent on subsidizing electricity consumers in 2022. Now, the special advisor to the president disclosed this while on a television program, stating that the sector was basically not in a great state before President Buhari took over in 2015. Now, speaking about the subsidies in electricity, it does seem to be a bit different from previous statements by the Minister of Finance last year.
Okay, so thank you, Zibby. Now, this story continues to explain why there's a trust deficit between the government and the people. And I'll explain what I mean. On the 11th of March last year, the Minister of Finance addressed Nigerians and stated clearly on the record that the government had removed all subsidies in the electricity industry. All, not some, not most, all. Fast forward to yesterday. The Special Advisor to the President on Infrastructure, Mr. Ahmed Zakari, then comes out to say that last year we actually spent 120 billion subsidizing customers in bands C, D, and E of the tariff segmentation, as opposed to 552 billion that was spent in 2021. So between the two of them, who's actually correct, who's wrong? Because on one hand, you have a minister saying we didn't pay any subsidies, and you're inclined to give her view some credence because she's not just any minister, she's the Minister for Finance. Then on the other hand, you have an advisor saying, look, heads up guys, we actually did pay 120 billion. Now, how is it that 120 billion was paid and the Minister of Finance is unaware? And if she's aware such a payment was made, why did she lie about it? Now, in any decent society, one of them will have to resign because the two statements cannot be true. The two statements cannot be correct. One statement is not only false, it is intentionally misleading. But above that, it speaks to the dire state of the nation that band C, D, and E belong to the people who will be most hit if electricity tariffs truly become cost reflective. And when you look at those bands, these are bands that the highest band within C, D, and E gets by, I think, the most maximum 12 hours a day, should expect power for 12 hours a day, max. Some of these bands do not expect power for like 6 hours a day. And it's a continual reminder that there are millions of Nigerians who go every day with little to no power. And it speaks to our planning, it speaks to our projection. We keep hearing we want to raise tariff electricity generation. We want to sort out the transmission company. No true nation, in fact, no nation will develop or can develop if the people are not educated, if you don't have sufficient power, and you don't have a sufficient regime in place to encourage businesses to start, thrive, and grow. It's not going to happen.
Okay, Ahmed via WhatsApp says, I don't think regular and average Nigerians are ready to pay more. Government has always said that the rich are benefiting more from subsidies. That is totally not correct. It's also a way of managing inflation. If the price of fuel is increased by just 1 naira, it drives more people into poverty. And Idima Puza says, even with the high cost of fuel, it's not available. Tariffs have also been increased without available electricity. Who will save us from this? We'll take a quick break, and when we return, the conversation will continue. This is Freshly Pressed.
Start your day the smooth breakfast way. Always fresh. Weekday mornings on Smooth 98.1.
Whose world is it? This is a woman's world. Let's talk about the woman. Women make up more than half of the world's population and potential. Let's talk about gender bias, relationships, and careers. Let's talk about the woman.
For the record, feminism, by definition, is the belief that men and women should have equal rights.
Every woman has got a story to tell. A story about her journey to being a hero against all odds.
When I was just 11 years old, I became a female advocate.
Smooth 98.1 presents Soul Sisters, a discourse on the woman. Now on Smooth 98.1 every Wednesday from 11 a.m.
It's the breakfast break. You ready?
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. We're looking at the stories making the headlines. Let us know what your thoughts are. The WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. And you could also tweet at Smooth981. The hashtag is Freshly Pressed 981. And moving on to Vanguard. The central bank governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, has called on commercial banks to approach the apex banks across the country to pick up the new Naira notes. He said the new Naira notes were in vaults awaiting pickup by commercial banks.
I'm a bit confused because I'm wondering why the commercial banks need to be encouraged to pick up the new notes, especially since we have a deadline for phasing out of the old notes, which is literally, almost 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks. So if the commercial banks are not supposedly not picking up the new notes, I believe that there should be a reason, and CBN would most likely be aware of the reason. So I think that they should actually look into that and find out what the situation is, because historically, well, previously in the last few weeks, we've also had reports where the CBN had been saying this consistently, but people who work in banks had said that no, that wasn't the case, that they had been waiting supply of the newness and they hadn't received it. I think that the CBN should do a bit more in trying to solve this situation, because it would appear as though the lack of supply, the reduced supply of the new notes to the banks would be from the CBN, and then they need to really take a look at this. So he said the banks were being given slots before, but now the central bank is bending over backward to accommodate the demands of the banks in order to service them, so that they can service you and so that everybody will have access to the new Naira notes. I'm not sure that's really happening. Maybe it wasn't happening before, maybe it's happening now, and maybe they're finally finding out what the issue is and they're trying to address it. I wonder how this would also impact the deadline of the phasing out of the new old Naira notes, which is, in about 2 weeks, because they also have to manage the process of collecting back the old notes from customers, returning that to CBN, and then providing the new notes to customers.
All right, let's go on to this day. The Federal Executive Council, at its first meeting this year, approved a proposal by the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing for the NNPCL and subsidiaries to invest 1.9 trillion for the reconstruction of 44 selected federal roads across the country. Now, the council was chaired by Vice President Osibajo, also endorsed the sum of 1.35 billion for procuring 31 vehicles for use of the Federal Ministry of Environment.
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So this is a classic example. The more you look, the less you see and the less you understand. This is the same NNPC that complains of funding constraints, that it's becoming too burdensome to bring in petrol. Now, all of a sudden, they have money, or they will find money, or they have found money to fund the reconstruction of 44 roads across the nation. Now, first question, is it part of the memorandum and articles of association of the NNPC, since it's now a company, to be funding reconstruction of roads anywhere in the country? Is that what it was set up to do? Why do we have a ministry for works in the country? If the NNPC is reconstructing 44 roads, what does the ministry do? Two, they say that from the story that they will fund the roads with about 1.9 trillion, and then they'll get the credit back in form of setting off against their common income tax. Now, this whole transaction is a bit murky. It's not very transparent. And these are critical questions the incoming administration needs to look at. Now, what are these 44 roads? Where are they located? Who conducted? So, what is the process for NNPC reconstructing the roads? Do they get in their own contractors? Do they inflate the prices of the contract so they can get higher net offs against their government income tax assessment? What exactly is the procedure? Now, these contracts, will they be submitted to the Federal Executive Council for vetting? Because the NNPC is no longer a government agency. It's now a private company. So what is the process? I just see this as, forgive me, yeah? It is possible that if this project isn't properly monitored, we will start to hear very funny and wonderful stories emanating from this transaction further down the line. The Bureau for Procurement, are they aware of this transaction? Have they signed off on the contractors? So there are a lot of checklists. There's a checklist. I don't know what has been done. They just seem to have been given approval. And when the government starts to shirk its responsibilities and hands them over to private entities, does the same government reserve the moral right to now take credit for those roads and use them as materials for campaigns further down the line? Now, I noticed that the second part of the story, 1.35 billion to buy 31 vehicles to monitor projects in the Ogoni area. Without a doubt, the Ogoni land has been severely polluted and affected. But how big is Ogoni land that you need 31 vehicles? How many people are actually doing the actual real-time monitoring? Because a vehicle will sit, say 5 people. Okay, if they want to be comfortable, 4 people. So 31 vehicles is 128 people. Are they honestly suggesting to Nigerians today that 128 people will be monitoring the cleanup of Ogoni land simultaneously?
We've got some messages coming through. This one is from Chika. Chika says, fuel scarcity is biting harder day after day. NNPC, the major importer of fuel into the country, is the major importer of fuel into the country, yet the product is nowhere to be found. In spite of all this, there's an approval of 1.9 trillion naira for the NNPC to fix roads across the country. And Dami from Ikeja says, I haven't got a new Naira note from a cash machine. I still used one yesterday. Gilbert Musa says, on the persistent fuel crisis in Nigeria, the fuel riots in May 1992 and scarcity of May June 97 was enough lesson or bitter pill for us to address the challenges in the long term. Let's go on to the next headline. This one is from Punch. Now, the Edo State government has confirmed the arrest of 2 village chiefs in connection with the January 7th train attack, which resulted in the kidnap of 20 passengers at the Igwebe train station. The State Commissioner for Communication and Orientation disclosed that 7 other suspects had also been arrested in connection with the incidents.
Okay, we're thankful, first of all, that all of the kidnapped passengers have been rescued, in quote unquote record time comparative to the last kidnapping that we had at the Kaduna to Abuja train.
So, quick one. I won't say rescued. I'll say we're grateful that they're back with their loved ones, because you do not know the modalities through which you're reunited with their loved ones.
Sure. So we're grateful that they're back at home, and for me, I think this this recent kidnapping also calls into question the security situation on transportation routes. Now, not just even on the rail, even on the roads, because with increasing severity, we hear about all of these kidnapping things, and there are a lot more kidnapping situations that we don't even hear about. There are a lot more attacks on people on the road driving, that we don't hear about. So for this one, it's nice that they've already arrested some people. There are debates as to whether the people are culpable or not. Some people have also brought in a political angle and said that the traditional rulers are enemies of the governor and this is his way of trying to deal with them. Well, that's debatable. But I would like a situation where the law takes its full course and investigations are properly done, and as to determine who's culpable for this. It would also be nice for us to find out eventually who's culpable. Let everything be transparent. Let's find out exactly who planned it, who executed it, who funded it, what the purpose was, and all of that, so that the template can be used for future occurrences. I'd also want to say that this also calls into question about our security situation. So is the police adequately staffed to be able to provide security in these kind of situations? Because along the roads now, even on the rail, do we need to be able to deploy more security apparatuses? And considering that the police is a federal institution, and the states may not necessarily have so much power over them, is there a way that the states can also contribute towards the security architecture to be able to support security on transportation routes?
So a quick one. I'm just going to piggyback on what Bugbemi said. So I'm not sure the police can get the job done because they can't even protect themselves. Just last week, a police DPO was rescued from
Mm.
people who abducted him. So if senior police officers are being abducted, are being kidnapped, why then do we expect that they will protect us?
Because that's what they're mandated to do.
They can't give you what they don't have.
Mm.
So if they can't protect themselves, just be certain there's a very slim chance they will be in a position to protect you. So we need to temper our expectations and live according to our collective reality.
Right, OMT via WhatsApp says the fuel queues are getting longer. The problem is biting harder. On the new Naira note, who is bending the truth, the CBN or the commercial banks? Who has more to lose if they don't meet the deadline? The answer to this should give an indication of the group to check. And that is from Mary from Alakbere. Okay, Yinka Bolu says, last I checked, NNPC has been transformed into the NNPCL. The road reconstruction or whatever is structured to look like what other companies have done along several stretches of roads, which honestly I see nothing wrong with. Other companies are doing same, so what is the issue with that? And let's see if we can quickly touch on this story. We've got just about a minute to go. One person has lost their life as a story building collapsed in Lagos, and this happened in Ikeja Aromire Avenue.
Okay, so very quickly, our thoughts go out to the family of the person who died. Again, he's not named, and it speaks to the failure to place a proper emphasis on the value of the Nigerian life. Now, this is another building collapse too many. The previous commissioner resigned over a previous collapse, and here we are again. So it speaks to a bigger issue. One, the issue of the materials even being used. Because if standard materials are being used, we shouldn't be having this problem. Two, it also speaks to a near failure, near absence of proper monitoring and proper uh, compliance with the laws. So you find situations where Lagos state officials will mark a building, say stop work, bring down, and the developers continue to build, rush the building, apparently sort out the situation, and pronto, the building's ready.
Mm.
And then when the building collapses, everyone acts surprised. But again, it also speaks to the staffing strength of the Lagos state agencies. They do not have enough men on the ground because Lagos is rapidly growing in several directions, and they need more boots on the ground to effectively monitor. That's one. Two, and then they should be given more power, more latitude to enforce their rules because you speak to a developer, you seal his building, he calls someone and allows that pronto construction resumes.
That is speculation, Mr.
No. It's reality. I have developer friends.
Okay, let's take one more message. And this one is from Yinka. He says, DPO rescued. I think it should be the DPO is grateful to be back to his loved ones. And that's all the time that we have this morning on Freshly Pressed. Thank you so much, Bugbemi, and thank you, Mr. C, for joining us this morning.
You're welcome.
Do stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.